Hi, this is Coop's dad, and this is personal to me. This is our first time doing this. I want to let everybody know I'm Coop's dad. Thank you for joining me. And this is Dr. Elizabeth Zona. We're going to call her Dr. Z. She popped up in my TikTok feed, and it was about her passion on spreading awareness about fentanyl and kids using drugs. I started following her, and her content's really good, very relatable. And I saw so many kids responding to her. I just reached out, asked her if she would like to do something with us. Everybody meet Dr. Z.
So I am a double board certified physician. I'm an anesthesiologist and an addiction medicine specialist. I grew up in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and I was, a teenager, like everybody goes through that stage. And I spent a fair share of time doing some partying with some of my friends. When it came time to go away to school, I kind of left that world and just cracked the books and was able to pursue my medical education and become a physician about 6 years into practicing anesthesia, which took 12 years to train for. One of my previously very close friends had passed away from an overdose. Looking back, it really made me sort of question, why not me? Why didn't that happen to me? How did I get sort of lucky, or, and I started to really look at the impact of decisions we make when we're young and how they affect our outcomes later. And so I just try to kind of give back and basically talk to my previous self about how I, how I would handle sort of if I were a teenager now, because it's hard. Yeah. And so one of my biggest concerns is, fentanyl being out there and in the counterfeit pills, because teen me would be dead, quite frankly.
I'm here because, first of all, Cooper had such an incredibly large reach and following in social media. And in addition to all of his friends, that were social media influencers, rock star singers, models, actors, etc. And this has become very personal to me because Coop passed away. What they concluded was Cooper had taken the equivalent of one Xanax, which should not have killed or hurt anybody, but it was not a prescription Xanax, it was a counterfeit Xanax, and it had a lethal dose of fentanyl. And his death was quite quick and immediate, and it should never happened. So part of the things that Cooper started prior to his passing, our foundation is supporting. But one of the things that Coop's mom and I and his sister, and now the foundation have taken on is spreading as much as we can about fentanyl awareness and educating kids, but also parents, because we were not very educated or aware of what was going on out there in the world of youngsters doing drugs and what they were consuming. And what we're finding today is that it's worse than Russian roulette. There's a very, very good chance that if you take anything out there, you're probably going to die, and you don't have to die. So that's why it's personal to me, because we lost our beautiful boy, 8 months ago.
I'm so sorry for your loss and for the whole community's loss. I'm just learning about Cooper, and the more I look him up, the more I realize, he has this tribe of love, and it's so beautiful to see that. And I just, what a loss to that community. Yeah. And at least he'll continue to help people through you.
Thank you. He's living on. And again, this is stuff that he all started before he passed away. He started the Coops Advice Discord, which is now, several 100,000 people every day talking about their mental health issues and their addiction issues and everything else, and getting really like a lot of love and support from their peers. And it's great because I think all this starts from mental health. But as like with most of us, we need people to talk to and to be able to express and to get it out. He also created a relationship with an overdose, which got me involved into learning about fentanyl and test strips and all that, which ultimately led me to you. But one of the things I want to make sure that we talk about and not make an assumption that everybody knows, because I've had people on the Discord reach out to me and they ask, what is fentanyl? And I know fentanyl has a very good medical use. And so, which it's in your world. So maybe you can explain to us.
There are different sort of bootleg versions that are made by drug cartels, really, scientists, so to speak, with bad intentions, right? So the basic fentanyl drug medication is a very powerful opioid. So it's a pain medication that we typically in the operating room would give through an IV. So if you had an IV and you were going for surgery or another procedure that would hurt, we give this medication through your IV so that you can not feel that pain and get through the surgery comfortably. And fentanyl is one of the most commonly used ones in the operating room because of its potency and its short acting. So I typically can use it for a shorter procedure, and it's not going to last as long as, say, morphine or Dilaudid or something. It's going to have a shorter profile. So if you just have your gallbladder out, you know, I might give you a total of 250 micrograms, keep that in mind when we talk about what's in these fake pills. So 250 micrograms, or maybe, you know, 300, 400 micrograms for a whole general anesthetic. Now, there are other medications that go into that as well. That's just the pain part. We also have things so that you're not aware, so that you're not moving, right? So we have muscle relaxants, we have the gases that you inhale, but fentanyl and other type of medications like it are our main meds for pain. Now, a side effect of such a strong opioid is that it can affect your breathing. Now, when I have you asleep for your, say, gallbladder, that's the example I'm using, it doesn't matter that you've stopped breathing because I've already given you muscle relaxants that include your breathing muscles. I already am breathing for you. I have you on a ventilator.
If you didn't do that, you would stop breathing and die. Okay, so, and then I'm assuming that even in some other situations, like let's say somebody is dealing with cancer and they're not going through a surgery, but they might have something that's maybe, let's say maybe towards the end of their life, that they're struggling with something and the pain's so severe.
Certainly, yes. Cancer patients have cancer doctors that may be giving them medications, typically by mouth or by patch. Maybe, you know, they have like transdermal patches, those sorts of medications. Once you put something in the IV, it is definitely riskier, right? So you can get higher levels quicker. And there's a smaller wiggle room if you make a mistake, if you give too much, or if you gave the right amount, but they're too sensitive to it. So those types of things. And palliative care, that would be end of life. So that they may have some IV type medications in a monitored environment. But again, if you're in the process of end of life, stopping breathing may be an acceptable consequence if you're dying from a cancer that is going to kill you today or tomorrow anyways, if that makes sense. I hope that doesn't sound hard.
Yeah, so let me make a distinction here, because like you mentioned, it's a synthetic opioid. You know, it's a manufactured drug. There are people out there that are getting addicted and abusing prescription opioids like Percocet and OxyContin, et cetera. Can you get prescribed fentanyl, or is that something
technically can get fentanyl patches and those sorts of things prescribed?
Usually. Again,
because of the potency and the control of that type of medication, it's very heavily regulated and there's a high risk. So they're not going to give it to you. Like you can't, for instance, you know, you use it IV at home or anything like that, unless if it were an end of life situation, and typically they use morphine and other.
Got it. Okay. I'm being told that fentanyl is so much stronger that it's about 50 times more potent than heroin.
Correct. 100 times stronger than morphine. And it is highly addictive.
Is that correct?
Something to think about when you think about addictiveness is the stronger and the shorter acting, right? Those are going to be higher addictive. So when you look at, say, cocaine versus crack cocaine, you know, if one lasts longer than the other, crack cocaine has that shorter action, quicker peak, stronger, and it's wearing off sooner. Those are your more addictive versions, right? So when you move from heroin to fentanyl, you do increase your addictiveness because it's stronger and it's shorter acting.
I've known just from the films that I've seen, the documentaries and the YouTube videos and some of the things I've read, like if we talk about opioids, they're very addictive, and a lot of people have gotten addicted to them, not trying to, from like maybe had a surgery, like knee surgeries or shoulder surgeries, minor surgeries, but nothing like catastrophic. And yet they get prescribed, they get addicted, and then they can't get the prescriptions. So they go to a drug dealer and they get what we call a counterfeit or a street opioid, which is some drug dealers made it. And typically what we find out, they're being made in Mexico, they're coming across the border, and they're being sold to people that can't get them or they're cheaper. So we're finding that fentanyl now is being manufactured, bootleg manufactured. I guess I want to be able to explain this correctly. It's not being manufactured out of a pharmaceutical environment. It's being manufactured in Mexico with the ingredients coming from China, and they're putting it in all these other counterfeit drugs.
So imagine now that this is your business, right? So you want to decrease how much money you have to spend, and you want to increase how much product you have. And so in that situation, you can think of opioids, which are any like opiates or opioids, and then opiates, which means natural. So if it's an opiate, you have to grow it from an opium poppy plant, and you have to convert resins and things into these drug products.
Okay.
So if you have the synthetic opioid, you never have to grow these plants. They used to have fields and fields and acres, and security for those acres, farm equipment for those acres. Think of all the cost that they would have to put in to grow and to sell their heroin business, right? Now, if you have something 50 times as strong, shrink that by 50 times, it's easier for them to transport. It's easier for them to hide. And then if a lab gets taken down, they kind of just start a new one, versus if you had hundreds of acres of a field and it got busted, now you have to buy new land, get new security. There's an eye in the sky that can see on satellite, what you're doing there. And so it all boils down to a business. These people want to make money. They want to push their product. And unfortunately, people like my friend or people like your son, when they die, the person making millions of dollars doesn't see the loss of an amazing kid like Coop. They see the cost of, they see the cost of doing business. They're like, okay, well, I made $100 million last year. So, that's not my problem. And the way they look at it, I assume, is, they're going to go out there and do it anyway. Why shouldn't I make money off of it? That is unfortunately what we have to picture when we realize like what we're up against.
Where's the risk that you're seeing it today? Because people dying from fentanyl poisoning. Right. And so where are we seeing it in with our kids? Because that's the part that we really want to focus on. And I've come to this realization, we're not going to stop people from doing drugs. They're going to do them. It'd be nice if people just all did everything in the proper way they're supposed to, but it's not going to happen. So we're trying to do the best we can to educate and save those that are doing them. And it's not just kids, it's adults to all ages. But I'm looking at statistics today that says the number one cause of death in all people in the United States between the ages of 18 and 45 is fentanyl poisoning.
There have been a lot of reports of people who have been recreationally using cocaine for decades, who have, by their reports, not been addicted to it, but casually using it here and there at a party or a club or something, who have received a contaminated supply and died because they were not used to fentanyl. And it is in, I think, and double check me on this, but I believe the DEA last report had like 25 to 30%, I think, of all the cocaine confiscated contained fentanyl. So even just a line of cocaine, you just don't know if you're going to have cocaine in it or not.
Well, so my understanding is we're finding fentanyl now.
It's not like, when I was a teenager, where if somebody had a Xanny bar at a party, it was an actual Xanax. They're just not being as freely prescribed. I'm sure there are some out there being diverted, which means the person who has the prescription sells them. But the vast, vast majority of pills out there are these counterfeit ones, and they look really real. I can't tell the difference looking at them.
We're seeing fake opioids, which are the Percocets and the Oxycontin, et cetera, but also in that group called the antidepressants, which are the Zoloft and typically the Xanax. But I also know we're getting fentanyl deaths in counterfeit Adderall. We're starting to see in counterfeit marijuana, which is in the consumables. And now I know I'm hearing in the South from a DEA person that I've been chatting with in counterfeit vape cartridges. And so you're seeing it everywhere. Now I understand there's even a liquid form of fentanyl, which, you know, it leads me to be fearful that somebody might put something in somebody's alcoholic drink or their cup. So the point is
Right.
that unless something's is from a prescription, right, it's most likely it's going to be a counterfeit.
So as my friend who works for the DEA will kind of tell me, he said, you know, you go in and there's typically like a dining room table or something, and there's different piles of different things. And he said, we didn't used to see, you know, a huge pile of pills at every drug bust. He's like, but now every dealer has some pills that they're selling, and they're always tested in 6. So most of them are fentanyl. The vast majority, over 90%, are fentanyl. But he said that 6 out of 10 of them contain a fatal dose. So it's not just that 6 out of 10 of them have fentanyl. Pretty much all of them have fentanyl. But 60% of them have over 2 milligrams, which is enough to kill either of us.
Wow. Okay, that's something that's completely new to me.
Yes.
That is insane. I mean, you can't take anything unless you're absolutely sure it's a prescription.
You know, I made dumb mistakes like, you know, we do when we're teens because we don't know better. And I took something that wasn't prescribed to me when I was a teenager. I mean, this isn't about me. This isn't about my ego. You know, if somebody wants to fire me, go ahead. But when I was a teen, I made mistakes. And I think that we need to be honest about that because they're going to, you know, the part of their brain that is more willing to take risks is like on fire right now. It is, you know, normal.
Well, they don't think it's going to happen to me. The kids think I'm indestructible. And I'm with my friends at a party, and then someone offers you something, and your judgment's compromised because you might be drinking, or you want to feel cool and fit in, and you don't really think that, hey, if I take that, I've got a 60% chance.
And when I said,
that's the thing I think is our kids and our parents, we don't understand this. We don't know how serious this is. So I gave this example to who's now a friend of mine, a young adult. 23 years old. And the thing is like, he's not dealing with prescription narcotics. He's dealing with cocaine, which automatically, you know, that doesn't come from a pharmacy. So there's a very good chance that, I mean, at any time you can take something with a lethal dose of fentanyl. Mm-hmm. But with the 60% chance of that having a lethal dose, we were chatting and said, let's go get a pizza and let's get the DoorDash guy to go deliver to us. Okay, well, wait a minute, how about if you go pick it up? You know, and I'll pay you the DoorDash guy's fee. And he goes, sure. I go, well, let's look at it this way. You're only going to go a half a mile and pick up the pizza, but you have a 60% chance of dying in a fatal car crash. Are you going to go pick up that pizza? And he goes, no, I'm being crazy. I'm not going to go do that. But if you take a bump of Coke, or you take something from somebody you're not sure, those are your odds. What can we continue to do? You're seeing it on a different end. You're also on the East Coast to some degree. I'm here on the West Coast.
We always have to think about the big picture, right? Why are we, you know, why was I, when I was a teen, trying to go get drunk and, you know, try to escape stress of my life? You know, and why are they now? I think that we all need to sort of think of our mental health the same as we think of our physical health. And if something is broken or if something is injured, we need to address it. So it shouldn't just be that, you know, we sit there and bottle up our stress and don't talk to anybody about it until we get somewhere where we can just numb, right? That's what we're doing. We're numbing when we're getting intoxicated to try to escape. The thing about emotions and feelings is they don't go away. So they will continue to bubble up. We may numb them, we may push them down, but they will come back. And if something's bothering you, if you've been through something, or if, you know, you're feeling anxious every day, or if you're not enjoying the natural pleasures of life, talk to somebody. That could be a serious sign of anxiety or depression or another mental health concern that needs to be addressed. I'm a huge fan of therapy. I'm a huge fan of like peer support, like what Coop had started. You know, I think that we all are valid and valued and need to be heard. And I definitely, having grown up with an alcoholic parent, there was turmoil in the home, and I did have repressed emotions, and I didn't want to deal with them. And I wish that I had. I wish that I had back then, because later on I had some growing up to do and some therapy to attend. But, reach out. Don't suffer alone. There's no reason to suffer alone. And yes, the drugs are scarier, and I highly recommend that we don't use them to numb or to escape. I know, as you said, I'm a realist. Some people will. But keep in mind that there are better ways to deal with your mental health and that need to be heard and that need for compassion and caring. And what my main message would be is, yes, it's a more dangerous time as far as the drugs, but the beauty of it is it's also a time where we can talk about mental health. When I was a teenager, and if I would have said, oh, I have anxiety, people would have been like, just like, shut up and do what you're supposed to do. So a lot of the kids, right, that are signed in today have an alcoholic parent, or, lost an uncle to overdose, or a friend, or, it's not this somebody else's problem. It's all of our problem. We have 46 million Americans suffering from addiction right now out of a population of what, so it's important that we, introduce the elephant in the room and say, it's okay that, I have these feelings and I want to deal with them instead of numbing them. Because as a society, we're very comfortable with quick fixes and just, popping pills versus really doing the inside work.
Dr. Z, a message that I've kind of discovered since all this came about for parents was, we had a really good relationship with Cooper, open relationship, and we're close. Wasn't a kid that was, constantly in trouble or, super addict and, and one of those that you have to kick out and, send on the street. He and his sister Parker, they're best friends. They love each other. They hung with us. A good relationship.
Right.
And so not kind of like what I think most parents think about kids that are using drugs. Like, he wasn't a druggie. There's like the druggie kids. They're just like getting high all the time. And, and I don't even know if I can describe it, but just to say the drug kids, right? But what I found out is that it all kind of stems from that basket of mental health, whether it's insecurities or it's lack of self-esteem or whatever, negative self-talk feelings you have about yourself, where you feel you fall short, or you're not good enough, or you're not smart enough, or not pretty enough, or you don't fit in, all of that. It just kind of stems from where part of growing up and part of, finding yourself and learning to eventually understand who you are and love who you are, that it's okay who you are. We're all different for a reason. But what I've learned is kids, I don't care what the relationship is, they are not going to tell you 100% about how they feel with things that they're struggling with, because they don't want to disappoint you and hurt you. There's this shame and guilt cycle. And that wall may be as thick as 10 feet of concrete, or it might be a veil where you don't even think there's a wall there or anything separating you, but they will, they're fearful of hurting their parents, but they will tell their best friend or another adult or somebody else or somebody on a Coops Advice Discord. They'll open up because they need to. My message to the parents is, don't let your kids fall into that stigma. Don't put them in the framework of the stigma of like drugs and all that. They're young souls. They're hurting. They need to express. They need to be welcomed with open arms and love. They need to be heard by somebody, because something inside is hurting them. It's pain. And they need to find that comfortable and safe place to be able to express it. I think that's the beginning of being able to deal with it, as opposed to masking it, numbing it, like you said, with pills, or to the point where they just can't deal and want to go away. And we get suicide that happens with some of them. But I've read just recently that suicide is the second cause of death with young adults behind fentanyl, which is this, to me, it's like our nation needs to wake up and really focus on this, doing what you're doing.
Whether we actually hear somebody saying help or not, Just look at the statistics. It's there. They need to be heard. And it's been, you know, a generation of isolation, unfortunately. You know, I think that it was probably harder for these teens now, having had to, you know, do remote school and be home alone and not be able to see their friends and not be able to have those social interactions. You know, I don't know how I would have handled that. I'm sure that I would have been diving deeper into the mistakes that I was making and not, you know, growing stronger in healing. It just unfortunately was an isolating time. So I give them a lot of credit for the kids that are, you know, dealing with this generation right now. But one thing I always remind them too is to think about the teen brain. So it's a beautiful time in adolescence where they can learn so much and they can be so creative and they have so much to bring to the table. You can really think of two main parts of the brain, right? So the one is the reward center, and we have to think of the reward center as our survival area, right? It is a very primitive part of our brain, and it's there so that we can survive, meaning, you know, you eat something and you get a rewarding sensation, a dopamine burst in a part of your brain called the nucleus accumbens. And it's also a part of your brain where, you know, if you're having intimate relationship, that's rewarding, that feels good. When you're with somebody and you have the butterflies, those are all rewarding sensations. And our creator, whatever you believe, our creator gave us that to promote our survival. Other, you know, mammals have it as well, so that we will find food and find shelter and find love and procreate our species. At their age, these kids are perfectly wired to, you know, not necessarily sit and play video games, but think 1,000 years ago, to go out and help hunt and gather and build the shelter. So they naturally, they're naturally not as afraid. They're more brave. They're more willing to take risks. These are all beautiful, natural parts of the human brain. We have to think of the second part of the brain, which is up here, your prefrontal cortex. And that part of your brain says whether a risk is worth it or not, right? It says, that's a bigger risk than that one, and maybe the long-term decision of that isn't good. Well, that's the part of our brain that finishes developing last at age 25. So we have this revved up reward system that is so ready to go try new things, but this keep it in check part that's not done developing yet. And so that is why we need to really help our kids and talk to them and make sure that we can be their soundboard, you know, where it's say, okay, maybe this is okay way to blow off your stress, but maybe this is where you're getting into this Russian roulette type of situation. And so the teenage brain is really important, I think, to understand when we think about these things.
I got a question for you, because this is something that I've had commentary about, and it's not been favorable. There are fentanyl test strips now that you can get, and you can test your drugs out there to see if there's any fentanyl in it, and then hopefully make a decision to not take that. So, and have the risk of dying. But there's commentary from parents and school districts saying, well, you're promoting drug use by doing that. But personally, I look at it like, if you're going to take it, I'd rather you test it and make sure that you're not going to die from it, because most likely you're probably going to take it anyway.
First of all, the fentanyl test strips do come from a test that was made for urine, right? So it's actually a urine dip test, just so that everybody knows that. So you do need to liquefy somehow what you're using to test it. Keep in mind that the test sample may not represent the full supply. So you certainly can't test one pill and assume that the other 30 that came with it are okay, right? Because as we said, 60% have a fatal dose, 40% might not, 90-something% have fentanyl in the first place. So could you test that one that doesn't have enough or have it in there and think you're okay and then die from the next one? Sure. So it's not a perfect system. It's not actually designed for what they're using it for, but remember that everything in medicine, because my world's medicine, is a risk versus benefit, right? So if somebody's going to say to me, you know what, I've never, you know, taken these pills before, I think I want to take a pill, I think I'm going to test it, you know, I would say to them, I recommend you don't take that at all. Don't even touch it. But if you have somebody, to your point, who is dead set on, I want to take this no matter what, then absolutely they should try the test, because it's better than nothing. It's better than blindly taking it. And studies in the harm reduction world have shown that positive tests do change behaviors. So there's something that just came out, or was just shown to me at least about 3 weeks ago, and they were basically surveying habitual drug users, people who were using regularly, and when offered free testing strips, how many of them chose to use them, and a majority did. And then if it showed positive, if they modified their behavior, and they did, the majority, not everyone. And so is there value there? Yes, I would say there's value. You know, do I think that somebody's going to be more likely to use versus not use if they've tested? I guess we have yet to see. This is sort of a newer phenomenon, and I don't have any data on that. But if I were a kid, I think if somebody would have said, well, there's a 60% chance there's something deadly in it, and we can do this test and this and that, I'd probably say, you know what, bro, no. My friend is medicinal, Mary Jane, I'll go with that instead, or something. You know, I'm just assuming. I'm not promoting any drugs. But my 17-year-old self, if I were given that decision, I think that I'd say, you know what, I didn't realize it was that bad. I'll just choose some.
We're associated and support a platform here in California called End Overdose. And End Overdose started with this really cool guy, Theo, who is a LA County firefighter and paramedic. And what he does with this charitable organization is they do online training for Narcan, and you can, and also they'll provide you some fentanyl strips. But if you do the online training for Narcan, which is about a 15-minute video, they'll send you Narcan for free. And so we're promoting that with all of everybody we know and Coop's friends. And my wife and I have taken it, the course, we've passed it. I carry Narcan in my car. She does too. We're promoting to all of Coop's friends, all of our respective friends, because I think, like, not that I'm gonna, like any of my friends might be, have a opioid overdose or a fentanyl overdose, but I think I might be out somewhere, and somebody might have an overdose, and at least I have something there. I understand in some states Narcan is still hard to get a hold of. I know I just heard something this morning on Fox News. In Florida, fence strips are not legal to get. Are you supportive of us having Narcan?
It is so important. First of all, the friend of mine that passed away was left. People got scared and they ran, and she died. And, you know, dead people can't recover. And I think everybody deserves a chance to recover. We, like I said, used to learn from our mistakes. They may not be so lucky today, and they could die from their mistakes. If we could give them that second chance, we would have not only fewer overdoses, but healing in our communities, right? The ending of this massive amount of loss of really good people. And so, yes, I'm a huge fan of Narcan, or I should just call it naloxone, right? I don't want to use just a brand. There are other brands, Cloxata, Zimi are brands. And we can have a whole hour on just, you know, recognizing opioid overdose symptoms and what to do. And so, you know, if you want to plan a follow-up, I would be happy to do that with you as well.
Let's see if we can do something with our friend Theo from End Overdose, because I mean, as a LA County paramedic, I was asking him how often on your runs do you do? You know, they work these hours, like 12-hour shifts. I go, how much is overdose? And he goes, it's almost every day. It's almost all overdose.
A lot of the drugs that can cause an overdose might be reversed by your naloxone products, Narcan and those other ones. But what can happen is the Narcan can wear off, and you still have the fentanyl or the heroin in your system. So if somebody does overdose, not only do we need to treat them, you know, and take care of them, but we need to stay with them, and we need to call 911. Please don't worry about getting in trouble. Please worry about saving your friend, because, you know, what would you want done if it was you? I would rather, you know, explain, I made a mistake. I was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and this is what happened, and I helped them, versus, you know what, I just let my friend die.
There was one other interesting point that the End Overdose people brought up with us. We met, my wife Treva, Coop's mom, and I, we met with them here, and that was, if you're going to use, don't use alone, because if you're alone and if you have a fentanyl overdose, you're not going to have time, even if you have Narcan, to get it administered to yourself. It could be too quickly. So if you're going to use, be with somebody because they might save you.
About the never use alone. I had posted a TikTok with the information on never use alone. It's actually a hotline. Like, they'll be on the phone with you. And if you stop answering them, they call for help for you. And so the person that actually created that sent me a message and was like, hey, that's my program. And I just really want to thank you for putting it out there. And I was like, wow, I mean, that's amazing that this person, this one, person kind of birthed this, life-saving harm reduction. Again, it's a spectrum, if we're dead set or intent on using, or we're just so addicted that at the time we can't stop, harm reduction all the way. And about the Good Samaritan law, every state does have.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're bringing that up because my wife is
yes.
on the.
Yes. My thought is that, we have laws and we have things out there in the heat of the moment. Nobody's going to Google that, like, oh, am I covered in Pennsylvania kind of thing. It's good to know it ahead of time, as the commenter mentioned, to definitely know, what you're covered for. But remember that these are our fellow citizens that make these decisions about us. And I would hope that if the alternative was to leave your friend to die and you help them, that there would be some immunity. And most states do have a Good Samaritan law, but some are real sticklers and will not. And then, we could get onto a whole nother tangent of the drug-induced homicide laws. Again, everything's a spectrum, right? Is it good if somebody's, selling, making $1 billion a year selling these deadly things to hold them accountable? Yeah. I mean, I couldn't even sell makeup that caused a rash without disclosing that, I mean, that we have protective laws for a reason. But on the flip side of that, are people more likely to leave their friend if they're afraid of going to prison? Probably.
You mentioned earlier about looking at the bigger picture of things. And so this isn't the forum to talk about it today. But we're talking about what do we need to be aware of that can harm and kill our children and our friends and neighbors. But number two, what can we do to help them in the event that they do have an overdose, like with naloxone, et cetera. But the real solution is to prevent it from coming in to the United States, and that's a whole other discussion. It gets political, but I saw this one. I think he was a government official that said, and I think he said it so succinctly, it's not a red or a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue. And we need to do something about that. And I know that where my wife and I are, we will be moving in that direction. And we'll leave that for another time. But I'm glad, and hopefully we'll get the Good Samaritan law in every state, and we'll get the terminology of accidental overdose, and a lot of these cases, like with Cooper, switched over to fentanyl poisoning or fentanyl manslaughter or fentanyl homicide, because it needs to be there and it needs to be prosecuted. I got a bunch of people asking questions, and see if we can address a few.
It is making their profits so much greater. And yes, there is loss of life associated with that. But if you think like a criminal, when that person dies, the next person is in line ready to buy it. So it's not like the person who's making, 50,000 pills is going to lose a customer because somebody died. There's the next person in line right behind them to get them, unfortunately. And the other thing is, because for every person that will die, think of how many people become addicted. And so, yes, some are lost, but some are brought in. And really, it just comes down to money. It just comes down to money. Think like a criminal, you start to realize that, our friends and our family members and our kids and our cousins aren't what matter to these people, but they need to matter to each of us so that we can help each other. And spreading awareness is number one. So my, community is a smaller scale. I would be more than willing to grow and to do whatever I could do to help more people. And that's why I started TikTok. One of my mentees, I'll call her, she's a pre-med medical student now, but she had said to me, and this is why I went on TikTok, she's like, you get 300 kids in an auditorium, that's great, but you could get 3,000 with a 15-second post and really hit the mark. And so I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And as soon as I got on there, I realized she was right.
All the folks that are on here, all the kids, I always like to ask, send me a comment here. Let me know where you're from. Hello, Austria. Hello, Australia. Hello, Great Britain. Hello, Belgium. Emily,
They're everywhere.
Dr. Z, this is so fun. Hello, Canada. Hello, UK. Hello, Scotland.
You will not be harmed by administering Narcan. I don't want somebody to think that, by touching the person who's overdosed, that they're suddenly going to become overdosed themselves. There have been a lot of studies by the American College of Medical Toxicology that show that unless you are, inhaling it or getting large amounts in your mucous membranes, which is, open mouth and those sorts of things, it's not like it's just blowing in the air and going to get us. I, have spilled fentanyl on myself when I was drawing it up for a procedural sedation, and, it's gotten on my hands, and I didn't die, I just washed my hands. It's, could it be weaponized? If you look it up in 2002, it was in the Soviet Union, right? There's actually a story, I think it was carfentanil. It was weaponized and blown into a building. That's not what we're dealing with here. If somebody's down and it's already, basically essentially killed them, overdosed them, it does not mean that because you go and squirt Narcan in their nose and turn them on their left side and sit with them and call 911, you are not going to overdose by being close to them. So I just want to make sure that we cleared that up. Thank you to whoever reminded me to do that.
There's also a couple of points about Narcan. And one is when we did the training, the Narcan that we elected to get from end overdose was the nasal spray, and you can get it in 2 different doses, and we've got a few packages that we keep on our cars, but there's also an injection. I didn't take the injection one, using the needle, because I felt like, first of all, am I in a situation where it is somebody's overdosing, I'm going to be kind of panicked, or I'm going to be kind of freaking out. I'm not comfortable using a needle, but I am comfortable using nasal spray, and so it can be as effective, and you may have to administer 1, 2, or 3, or 4. But so there's the two ways you can do it. But most importantly, let's say they're not overdosing from an opioid, and you give them Narcan. My understanding is it doesn't hurt them at all.
It's very low risk compared to the overdose.
We are almost done. Is there anything you'd like to share or leave with everybody that's here?
The 2 most common reasons for death in that age group, right, 14 to 18, 14 to 20 that we're talking about, is car accidents and overdose poisonings. Car accidents are going down because of safer cars and seatbelt laws and airbags and everything else, and overdoses are going up. I suspect that in the next year, maybe it was last year, I'm not sure, the data is going to end up showing that overdose is going to be the #1 cause in this age group. We have to be aware, we have to tell our friends, and the most common pill that kids are running into is a blue circle pill. It has an M and a 30, and if you see that, don't touch it, don't take it. It's most likely fentanyl, and there's a 60% chance that it could end your life. I have patients who are very experienced, in the narcotic users who are in recovery now, or will come to me to start recovery, who will say to me, oh yeah, I buy a pressed perk and that lasts me 4 days. They know to break it up and take it over 4 days, and they could handle 10 stamp bags of heroin a day. So if you think you can just take one and you're not going to be a statistic, please, don't. And tell your friends and tell everybody that you can, because it is really lethal and it is everywhere. And then the big thing is to remember that addiction is a very easy club to get into. If you have a human brain, which we all have, you are susceptible to addiction. Know your risk factors. 40 to 60% of our risk factors come from our genetics, right? So know what your genetic risk is. I had an alcoholic mother. I'm at risk, right? So that's why I think about it as an adult when I have a glass of wine. If I feel like, oh, I want that second one, do I? And I think about that. I probably think about it too much. But know that it's an easy club to get in. It's a very hard club to get out of. So know your risk factors for addiction, and try to prevent sudden death by definitely watching what you put into your body.
A couple of people have asked me some questions about Coops Advice. So while they're here, I want to be able to answer a couple of those. But first, the Coops Advice Foundation, everybody that's involved, we've looked at all of this from this very, very simple standpoint. We try to break everything down in very simple, easy terms, not try to conquer the world or save everybody. Our goal is if we can just have enough effect on one person and we can help save one person's life or someone from making that fatal decision, we're a success. Just one. If we end up with two, then that's great. And so we're taking it very, very, very simple and very slow. One of the messages that came through was someone would love to have some Coops Advice stickers, maybe stickers with a barcode, to the Discord and other things. I think it's a great idea. We will be doing another merchandise drop the first quarter of this year, probably in April. We sold out 2 times really quickly, so I'm really sorry, everybody. But
I need to check out this merch.
Dr. Z, thank you so much. I'm just really thankful that you responded to my reach out on TikTok and that we're actually doing this. I think I saw some of the chat messages that people are really thankful for this. And I think it's helping. And I look forward to doing it again with you. And
and to your point, if we save one person from becoming a statistic, it's worthwhile. And addiction and drug use, it's a very isolating condition, right? And so if we can combat that with community, then we're going to win.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. And for more information, please follow us at thecoopsadvice.org. Thank you.